Okay, hello there. What I'm looking at today is the Robosapien version 1 head mechanism. The head itself doesn't have a separate motor to turn it. What happens is when it raises one arm, the head turns towards the arm that's raised, and when the arm goes down, it goes back to the centre, and if the other arm is raised, it turns towards that arm, and then back to the centre when that arm goes down. If both arms go up, then it stays in the centre. A very complicated mechanism as far as I'm concerned, for what seems to be quite a simple sort of action. So how does it work? Well, each of the arm motors, shoulder motors should I say, has on it a wheel with a peg on it. This wheel also acts as a cam so that it pushes against the switch, so the Robosapien knows when its arm is in a certain position. So a switch pushes against this, which has a bump on it, so the switch is activated when the bump hits the switch. I think it works both ways, so it goes up, it knows it's up, and when it's down, it knows it's down. So this is a dual purpose sort of wheel on the motor. The motor also, of course, has, we can see it, the part on the other side which drives the arm. So when this is in place, the motor, the little peg, fits into a slot on this big lump of plastic here. The motor then goes into position, which I find very difficult to do. Just doesn't like to go in, it bobs in suddenly. There we are. That's in place. So now when this rotates, this peg moves upwards. Well, it moves in a circle, that's why this has got a slot on it, and pulls that up. Can we show that? Let's try. So there, as it moves up, that arm is pulled upwards. As that's pulled upwards, there's this L-shaped piece here, so this end goes up. Let's remove the motor, make it easier. Can we get that off without it falling too much in bits? There we are. So now when this moves up, so that's moving up and down on the motor, this L-shaped piece here means that as that goes, well, on this case left to right, this goes up and down, and in going up and down, that pulls on a spring which is underneath the gear wheel on the head. So if I remove the head, we can see, hopefully, there's a rack underneath here. So pulling this up and down moves the rack. The rack then interacts with the cog on the bottom of the head and moves the head. So that moves that backwards and forwards. Similarly at the other side, this pulls this one and that moves the rack in the opposite direction. So the head moves in the opposite direction. But if both are pushed, can I do both at once and not have it all go twang and all the spring come flying out? Let's try. If I can do both at once, the rack shouldn't move, it should stay in the same place. But that takes an awful lot of effort. The motor must be really strained to do that. So there we have how the mechanism actually moves. This of course moves this way, and then there's another one in a slot that moves the other way. If I want to hack it, what can I do? Well, the first of course is to stick a little motor onto it. So I love these little lock motors. They have a gearbox built onto them. They're nice and tiny. and I could probably fit that in there. If I'd need to find a gear that would go on to the rack so that this would drive the rack, get rid of all the levers of course and just leave the rack with this having a gear on it. But that means I'd have to have end stops to tell it when it had got as far as it could go, which makes it complicated. So the other idea is to stick in a servo. These are bog standard sort of 9G servos that can go in, and then the arm on it, I don't know if I can get that in once I've got all the gubbins out. Maybe I can get that in. The arm then would go down because there's not much room at the top here. If we look at the top piece that goes on, we can see that it's just sort of shaped and the gear wheel's going to go into that area there. So that wouldn't leave me much room for my arm unless I cut all this away, which I can't see any reason why I shouldn't do. Cut all that away, and then it could be able to connect onto the bottom of the head, put a little arm, use these two screws to put an arm coming up with a hole in the top, so that that would be moved by the servo, and that would give me complete control over the head. I'd need a separate computer to do it, or microcontroller, but I'm going to put an Arduino on anyway, so I could have the Arduino so it could operate the head without having to operate the arms. If the big servo won't fit, then I could use a smaller servo. That's this one, but that, I don't know if it'd be powerful enough to drive the head. Could certainly be easier to get it in and to get an arm across onto a link on top of the head, but that'd have to go down where the rack was, get rid of the rack, put a little arm down, and that can go backwards and forwards. And as the rack itself is held in by two screws that go through, there's a couple of screws on a slot, so the rack slides on a slot. There's a slot there with a couple of screws going through, and they hold the rack in place. So once I'd taken that out, I could use that hole there to be able to have my lever in it. So yeah, that looks to me like I could have Robosapien's head independently controlled. Need to try it, need to build it, see what I can do. Probably take a long time, but what the heck, it's all worth going for. So I'll strip all this gubbins out here, stick a motor in, and hopefully I'll have independent control of Robosapien version 1's head. Yep, I'll go for that. Bye now. Bye.